When you want to transfer an artwork that you have made from one paper to another paper, like onto a canvas or onto a different colored piece of paper, there's a few different ways you can go about this. One way is to use transfer paper. Now, this is a blue transfer paper. You can use this more than once. As you can see, I've used this many times. The way you go about this is you would take two pieces of tape and tape down two sides of this, like this, and then this paper won't move anymore. This will stay. I don't want to tape down the transfer paper. You'll rip it and that won't go well. So I'll just slide the transfer paper in underneath this paper. You want to make sure the dark chalky side goes towards what you're transferring to, and the lighter side is facing towards your artwork. So I'll slide that in there, and I like to trace with a pen so that I can see where I'm going, but you can trace with a pencil as well. You press a little bit harder than normal, but you don't have to press super hard. So if I was to pull this up, you can see right there it transferred that ear that I just drew. Now, if it's going the wrong way and you have your paper, the dark side facing up, what's going to happen is you're going to get done tracing this whole thing, and it's not going to be on your paper. Instead, it's going to be on the back of what you're tracing. And so don't make that mistake. There's different colored pieces of paper that you can use. You could use black. There's even a white transfer paper. There's all the colors that you can think of. And each one works the same. You can see here where I just transferred some gray. This is just kind of like a graphite transfer paper. If I was to do this grass here, you could see that that transferred there. But what if you had a black piece of paper? Well, then you would need a white or a blue transfer paper to be able to transfer the drawing onto that. So if I was to trace these lines here, you can see that it shows up on that black paper. Okay, what are some other ways that we can transfer? Well, one of the ways that I like the most, especially if I'm transferring onto watercolor paper, is I would take my watercolor paper and I'd put it on a light box. First, I would tape down this, and then you would also need to tape down the watercolor paper so it doesn't move. You don't have to have a whole lot of tape. You can do just a little piece of tape, and then you can see through it, and then obviously you would trace it. You can trace with a pen or you could trace with a pencil. When I'm doing watercolor, I like tracing with a pen, but you have to make sure that you use a pen that will work. So you can see here that whenever you use a correct pen, it doesn't bleed when you put watercolor on top of it. But if you use a pen that will bleed, then that's going to ruin your artwork. So make sure that the ink that you're using is going to not bleed. Go ahead and test it. Even if you see it here, test it again on a scrap piece of paper. Make sure that it's not going to ruin your artwork before you trace this. So I could just trace this entire drawing using this light box. If you don't have a light box and you're at home, you could always tape this up to a window where the sun is shining in, and then you can trace it because the sun will act as your light box through that window. Okay, one more way to transfer. If you don't have charcoal transfer paper, one thing you can do is you can take your drawing and then take a charcoal stick. If you take this charcoal stick and you just rub it on the back of your paper like this, you want to fill in the whole thing. Whenever you turn it over, it will act just like a transfer paper. So I could take this and I can trace here these ears, and it will transfer onto this paper in charcoal. This works best if you're having to transfer onto a canvas. This is your best method, by adding a whole lot of charcoal on the back and then transferring. But if you're transferring onto watercolor paper, sometimes whenever I go to transfer, it just makes a mess of everything. You can see here all of the charcoal that is also left on just the watercolor paper, and that's really hard to get off. So I would suggest using a regular pencil, or like I said, I like using a pen if you're going to transfer onto watercolor paper. Okay, that's different ways to transfer your drawing onto a new paper or a new canvas. I hope you enjoyed that lesson.